Hey guys, tonight we're going to wander back several thousand years to when sleeping comfortably was, well, let's generously call it a work in progress. Imagine lying down at the end of a long day only to rest your head on an immovable block of stone and being told, yes, this is peak bedtime luxury. You can probably guess you wouldn't have lasted long in ancient Egypt's world of bedroom design. Don't worry though. Tonight, you won't have to endure the neck cramp. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, humor me for a second. Drop a little comment below with where you're listening from and what time it is right now in your corner of the world. I always find it amusing to think about this same sleepy story curling through living rooms in Tokyo at dawn and drifting someone else into slumber in Madrid at midnight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The desert is cold in the evenings, a dry chill that sneaks over the sands after that daytime furnace of sunlight. You're standing barefoot on a smooth flat stone just outside a small mudbrick house near the Nile. The air smells of clay and warm reeds, and somewhere in the dark, a dog barks at nothing in particular. That's the soundtrack of ancient Egypt, the quiet moments, punctuated by frogs in irrigation ditches and reed flutes from a distant dinner. It's bedtime, about as close as you'll get to settle down in this era. You step into the compact little house, ducking your head beneath the doorway, and the space instantly feels smaller than expected. Roof beams of palm branches cross above you, and the walls are made of hardened earth, the exact color of baked bread. Life here was never about huge bedrooms. Instead, the family packed together in one room at night, knees to elbows, all piled on woven reed mats. Forget dream foam or memory foam. The only foam here came from beer froth or slightly overwashed linen. The mats on the floor still smell faintly of river mud because they were woven from papyrus reeds hauled up earlier in the season. Reeds woven tight enough became the family mattress though, to you. It feels more like the world's stiffest picnic blanket. Yet, for them, curling up on a cool mat inside thick clay walls was paradise compared to the open desert. When the hot season hit and historians remind us it was a scorching climate, they sometimes preferred to sleep on rooftops, letting the night breeze lick over bare arms and legs. You can already sense this wasn't just sleep, it was survival choreography, an annual ritual of adapting to the moods of the sun. Of course, there's that one object in the corner. At first your brain insists it's a bookend, or maybe a decorative stand in case someone needed to display fruit. It's solid, carved stone, shaped into a short pedestal, with an arched top the perfect width of your head. Congratulations. You're staring at the cutting-edge pillow technology of ancient Egypt, the stone headrest. Now you're probably shaking your head literally, because putting it on this thing hurts after 30 seconds, but to them it was genius. Imagine a life without air conditioning, surrounded by walls that trap daytime heat. Heat rises, yes, but when you're flat against a mat, your face collects unwanted warmth. By resting your head on a little stone arch, your neck was raised, your skull cooled by open air under and around it. Think of it as the ancient Egyptian version of flipping the pillow to the cold side, except the pillow never warmed up in the first place. And here's where it gets curious. The headrest wasn't just about ergonomics. Many of these pieces were decorated with tiny engraved figures, protective deities, carved right into the stone. One particularly popular bodyguard was the dwarf-like god Base, a guardian of dreams and slightly ridiculous parties. Imagine gazing at your nightstand guardian every evening before bed. Not quite a dream catcher, not quite a teddy bear, but close enough. One widely accepted fact is that Egyptians really believed sleep could open you up to danger. Not just the danger of uncomfortable cricks in your neck, but spiritual danger. Nightmares were seen as unwelcome visitors, and a solid headrest with deity carved in could supposedly put a protective fence between the sleeper and the shadowy stuff lurking in dreams. Still, historians disagree on exactly how practical the headrest was versus how much it was a symbol of ritual protection. Did people genuinely snooze comfortably with their heads balanced on curved rock? Or was it more ceremonial, used on special occasions and among wealthier households? That question remains unsolved, and I suspect a survey of contemporary neck chiropractors would lean toward they must have been kidding. Asterisk. Let's pause for a sleepy sensory detail. The little house around you dims further as someone snuffs a clay lamp wick to keep away sparks. Your eyes adjust, but you still catch the faint glow of constellations through the rooftop holes. Orion, still marching across the sky, looking much the same as it does for you tonight. The air is cooler now, and the frogs along the canal croak in sync, the ancient Egyptian version of a nighttime playlist. Everything feels calm, except for the hard pillow, already making you rethink your life choices. You shift, readjust, and wonder if dreams here come more quickly in the desert silence, or slower, as though even your mind needs to adapt to stone technology. Asterisk. And so begins your nighttime journey, feet in papyrus dust, head on a carved block, cradled between myth and practicality. You open your eyes again. Not because the stone headrest was comfortable, but because you're curious about how the rest of this little house actually works. The air smells of barley bread cooling from dinner, faintly yeasty and warm, and there's the soft hush of animals outside, maybe a goat, maybe the family's trusty donkey muttering in its sleep. The Egyptians, like so many people living along fertile rivers, shared life not just with their kin, but with the creatures that held the farm together. Yes, bedtime was essentially a rustic sleepover. Mom, dad, 2 kids, 1 goat sneezing, and possibly a goose who refused to respect personal boundaries. Asterisk. You notice how the walls are thick with packed mudbrick. Daytime sun baked them, and nighttime cool crept back in. The village builder's genius wasn't in making things fancy, but in keeping everyone from frying to a crisp or shivering like reeds. These homes were humble, but they worked perfectly for a life paced by river floods and crop cycles. Inside, there are no chairs to slouch on, just low stools or mats. Sleeping, eating, talking, praying, it was all done close to the ground, which made the concept of a raised pillow seem even stranger. Why fuss over a headrest if everything else involved the floor? Asterisk. Here's a well-accepted fact. Mudbrick houses like this, with flat roofs, were the very backbone of Egyptian villages. Farmers relied on them season after season, rebuilding with fresh brick when rain wore them down. What's fascinating, though, is how many roofs doubled as nighttime bedrooms. Archaeologists discovered evidence of stairways leading up the outside walls. At night, especially during the blazing summer, families would climb up, spread mats on their rooftop, and drift into sleep under the stars. So really, the master bedroom was the infinite Nile sky. Not a bad ceiling view unless you were unlucky enough to have neighbors who snored like temple trumpets. Asterisk. Nestled on your reed mat, you realize everyone's bedtime looked more or less the same. A little clutter, some pottery jars, blankets woven of linen, and perhaps a shrine to a favorite god at one corner. This wasn't minimalist chic, it was necessity. Too many heavy belongings would melt in the heat or rot in the damp. Homes had to breathe, just like people did. Worn sandals by the door meant next day's fieldwork, while a chipped figurine of a household deity quietly stared from a shadowed nook, a silent guardian over sleeping family members. Asterisk. And since this is bedtime history, we have to acknowledge hygiene. Imagine summers when it's 100 degrees, that's 37 Celsius for our metric friends, and you haven't invented deodorant sprays yet. Bathing was a mixture of quick dunks into the Nile, and wiping down with natron, a mineral that worked as soap, so when families gathered to sleep in close quarters, let's just say intimate knowledge of everyone's natural scent was pretty much guaranteed. Perhaps this explains why rooftop sleeping was so popular. The fresh air diluted both the heat and Uncle Senef's onion-heavy dinner breath. Now, here's the quirky detail. Archaeologists uncovered not only mats and pots, but also children's toys tucked into corners of sleeping spaces, clay animals, little carved boats, and even rattles shaped like birds. So the edge of sleep wasn't only filled with gods and dreams, but with the soft clatter of playthings lying scattered where children had drifted off. Bedtime, in other words, looked unexpectedly relatable. Replace the reed mats with bunk beds, swap the clay duck for a plastic dinosaur, and suddenly it's timeless parents stepping carefully over tiny objects and muttering the universal plea, why can't they just put this away before bed? Still, historians puzzle over one question. Were headrests really part of common village life, or were they mostly reserved for wealthier classes? Most excavations uncover headrests in elite burials more often than in everyday homes. Perhaps your average farmer wasn't balancing his skull on carved alabaster. Maybe he simply rolled up a wrapped cloth, or pressed his head into folded linen. So we're left wondering, was the iconic stone pillow a symbol of daily life across households, or more of a bedtime status symbol, whispered about like the latest must-have gadget? Back inside this home, you lie back and listen. The reed mats rustle like dry grass when someone shifts. The clay lamp flickers low until it finally dies, leaving only faint moonlight slipping through cracks near the roof beams. The air cools another notch, so your skin tingles as though the night breeze is tugging gently on you. For a moment, you forget the unforgiving surface beneath your head and start to feel what ancient sleep might have really meant. Shared breath, shared warmth, shared stories, whispered until even the goats outside seem to join in a lull. And just as your eyes get heavy, you realize something. While we sleep surrounded by technology buzzing, humming, pinging, these villagers drifted off with nothing but silence. Frogs, a starry sky, and occasionally the crunch of grain settling in storage jars. Somehow, that feels like the better trade. You wake again, though perhaps wake is generous, since you were never quite asleep with your head on that polished block of stone. Now your curiosity nudges you forward. How exactly did humans come up with this peculiar idea of a pillow made not of softness, but of immovable rock? The object looks so unassuming, it's about the length of your hand, arched gently at the top like a miniature bridge, resting on a flat base. The craftsman who carved it probably had steady hands, because the stone has been smoothed so carefully that, in the moonlight, it almost gleams. In its own way, it's beautiful, the aesthetic ancestor of a modern bedside lamp or stylish throw pillow. Except this one feels distinctly less inviting for cuddling. The key function, support. Instead of comforting your head, the curved arch supports the neck. Egyptians, practical, as always, figured out that raising the head slightly helps keep air flowing around it. In fact, many believed warm air could get trapped if your face was pressed against the mat. A stone arch under your skull meant you stayed cooler even if your hair ended up flattened in a way that would take hours to brush out in the morning. Here's the widely accepted fact. These headrests show up in household settings, but also, intriguingly, in tombs stretching back as far as the Old Kingdom. And they weren't made randomly, they came in standardized shapes, suggesting they were a familiar, everyday item. Some were simple blocks of stone or wood. Others, more extravagant, were crafted from alabaster or ivory. They weren't improvised inventions. They were closer to essential furniture. Now for the quirky detail. Some of the carved versions bore not just smooth arcs, but little decorative flourishes along the sides. Imagine lying down at night to sleep, Knowing a tiny protective engraving of a lotus flower or an eye of Horus was literally cradling your head. It was part practical device, part personal safety charm, part bedside table art piece, an ancient multi-tool disguised as furniture. The modern equivalent might be a smoke alarm shaped like a friendly owl. Asterisk, and then comes the lingering question. Historians still wonder, how did people genuinely find this comfortable? A modern sleeper, raised on goose down, bamboo memory foam, or at least a flimsy airport neck pillow, finds the idea hard to swallow or hard to balance their head on. The design seems intentionally challenging. Maybe you adjust, like people today adjust to hammocks or maybe different sleep habits, more frequent naps, different postures made it natural. Maybe, truthfully, you just didn't have options, so the headrest was as good as it got. Imagine being handed a rock and saying, "Yes, this will do nicely. I'll take two." Asterisk, as your hand drifts over its surface, you notice scratches where the carving tool grazed. That moment of someone's chisel comes alive. A craftsman hunched in the sun, tapping away at limestone, perhaps humming to pass the time. Headrests required patience and skill. Cracked the stone the wrong way, and the curve was ruined. So each one was a miniature labor of love. You can almost hear the muttered Egyptian equivalent of, "Oh great, I've ruined another. That's 3 this week." Centuries later, you're still listening to his faint frustration etched into rock. Asterisk, and while the pillow may not appear indulgent, it reflected a life where sleep was considered precious, even sacred. In Egyptian philosophy, sleep wasn't just unconscious, rest it was a brush with the divine, another pathway into the world of gods and dreams. Rest wasn't wasted time. It was its own quiet ritual, worthy of its own tools. If you had a stone headrest, you weren't just fighting neck sweat, you were participating in something that balanced daily labor with cosmic meaning. Asterisk, the family around you shifts, muttering, rolling onto sides. Children curl into knots, mats crinkle softly. A tired father lets out a groan as his muscles remember plowing the heavy soil earlier that day. And there you are, perched on a block of stone, like an experimental sleeper on loan from the future. But slowly, your body adapts. The edge where your skull meets the curve doesn't feel unbearable anymore, unusual, and you realize the genius. By resting your head higher, your neck aligns straight, freeing your chest to breathe more deeply. Not quite a memory foam mattress commercial, but give them credit. The Egyptians were practical engineers, long before NASA got into the act. Asterisk above you. Roof beams creak in the night air, reminding you the house is alive in its own way. A soft breeze passes through cracks overhead. Almost automatically, you lift your head to glance outside through a rooftop hatch. The stars are still there, those same pinpricks of light, unchanged by millennia, watching over both you and the awkward block of stone. Asterisk. And this realization lingers. Comfort is relative. Maybe your great-great ancestor wasn't fussing with thread count spreadsheets, or adjusting their mattress to firm. Maybe they slept on a mat, head balanced on carved rock, and woke up surprisingly refreshed. What we consider impossible might have just been normal. Perhaps, years from now, someone will look back in disbelief at how we slept with glowing screens at our bedside, and chuckle. How could they possibly rest with blue light rectangles humming by their heads? Asterisk, the stone doesn't answer your questions, but it doesn't need to. It just props up your head patiently, as it has for thousands of years. The stone pillow hasn't quite won you over yet. Your neck feels like it's negotiating with gravity, but little by little, the strangeness begins to make sense. You're realizing this gadget wasn't about softness at all, it was about asterisk survival comfort. Asterisk, in the Egyptian desert, when the heat could cling to you long into the night. The stone pillow acted more like a personal cooling system than a fluffy cloud. Asterisk, lie still for a second. Notice how your head rests just above the mat. Air flows. more freely beneath your neck and scalp, whisking away the day's leftover heat. Think of it as ancient air conditioning, except cheaper than copper wiring, and mercifully quieter than a rattling modern fan. Suddenly, it's no wonder these people insisted on balance instead of cushion. They weren't trying to pamper themselves. They were trying to breathe easier. Here's one widely accepted fact. Egyptians treated heat differently than we do. Instead of fighting it with insulating materials, they promoted airflow. Their architecture was airy, linen clothing was thin and gauzy, and sleeping postures often emphasized ventilation. Raising your head kept you cooler and lowered the risk of bugs finding their way across your face during the night. In a land where mosquitoes and flies marched like tiny armies, the barrier effect of elevation actually mattered. Speaking of elevation, here's a delightfully quirky detail. Some headrests were deliberately tall, so tall that sleeping looked like balancing your skull on a miniature podium. Scholars think these extreme versions weren't practical, but ceremonial. Then again, who's to say some daring sleeper didn't insist? I like the tall one. It makes me feel fancy. Imagine wobbling your way to dreams, like an Olympic event in prehistoric circus balancing. And now, the open question for you to settle into. Did people truly find this comfortable, or did they simply train themselves because it had to be? Historians aren't certain. The evidence suggests commoners might not have used elaborate stone versions every night. Maybe just wealthier families did, while everyone else made do with cloth or wooden supports. Was comfort defined by necessity, prestige, or ritual significance? Maybe all three, but the debate drifts on, unanswered. Back in this bedroom, you start noticing more textures. Linen sheets woven from flax scratch faintly against your limbs. They're hand-spun, soft in some places, lumpy in others. The mat creaks as someone beside you turns, and a faint charred scent suggests one corner of dinner bread went a little too long in the clay oven. It's oddly cozy, imperfect, a cooling breeze, and star-patterned shadows bending across the mudbrick walls. From outside comes the buzzing whine of a mosquito. True to Egyptian engineering, your headrest keeps your face a fraction higher, which might actually save you from becoming the midnight buffet. Somewhere in Thebes, there must have been a salesman, bragging, "With this device, you too can sleep cooler, bite-free." Imagine the papyrus advertisement. As your body adjusts, you close your eyes and sense how this desert culture reframed rest. Sleep wasn't carelessly slumped into. It was orchestrated like architecture, like farming. The headrest was a conscious decision. Shape your sleep, and you shape your strength for the day ahead. You breathe deeply, neck aligned, and wonder if your tossing and turning at home would seem spoiled in comparison. The curious truth is, once you surrender to it, the headrest grows almost meditative. The hardness stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like structure. That tiny carved arch beneath your skull becomes an anchor, holding part of you still, letting your chest rise and fall steadily like the Nile's seasonal breath. And it dawns on you that in its own strange way, this odd device actually simplifies sleep one stone, one mat, one night, over and over. Your ears catch the Nile's lull again. Frogs croaking somewhere in irrigation ditches. Reeds swaying like a brush against the earth, and a farmer coughing down the lane. Above you, Orion's belt winks with a kind of amused patience, as if he too is balancing on a cosmic headrest. Adjusting slowly, you can't help laughing under your breath. The ancient Egyptians had comfort figured out in a way we'd call counterintuitive, but for them it was brilliant. Is it soft? No. But is it smart? Absolutely. And in this foreign stillness, lying just a hand's height higher off the mat, you feel lighter, cooler, and surprisingly prepared to drift further into night. Your neck is slowly adapting, but now your eyes catch something new, faint lines carved into the sides of the headrest. At first you think they might just be scratches from a clumsy craftsman, but lean closer and you realize they're intentional. Little symbols, protective designs deliberately etched so when you slept, your skull wasn't resting only on stone, you were also resting on symbols believed to guard your dreams. Asterisk, this was no ordinary bedtime gadget. Egyptians loved layering, practical tools with spiritual significance, and their pillows were no exception. Plenty of headrests bore designs of lotus blossoms, a symbol of rebirth and waking each day renewed. Some displayed the Eye of Horus, believed to shield against evil. Others even carried the visage of small gods, or charms. A pillow here wasn't only a pillow, it was a 2-for-1 deal. Ergonomic airflow and spiritual insurance. Asterisk. Here's the widely accepted fact. Archaeologists have found carved headrests in both homes and tombs, and the protective decoration was consistent. Egyptians seemed to weave together utility and the divine, unable lore, perhaps unwilling to separate the mundane from the magical, even at bedtime, when you should be your most defenseless. Life and belief merged quietly. Asterisk. Now the quirky detail. Among the figures sometimes incised is the god Bes the squat, bearded, slightly comical guardian of sleep, babies, and domestic life. Imagine a god who looks like a cheerful, grumpy little man with a lion's mane and bow legs. He was thought to chase away demons of the night and, conveniently, also presided over music and merrymaking. So yes, your head was held aloft by stone, watched carefully by essentially a divine, protective party dwarf that has to earn points for originality. Asterisk. And the open question. Were these engravings meant to be viewed by the living sleeper, or did Egyptians carve them primarily with the afterlife in mind? Some argue the charms warded nighttime spirits during everyday sleep, while others insist their real function was funerary, to shield the deceased on their eternal journey. Either way, symbols on the pillow remind us that in this culture, sleep wasn't trivial, it was a portal. Asterisk. The room around you dozes peacefully. A child in the corner lets out a thin whistle snore that barely competes with the bullfrog orchestra outside. You notice the stone beneath your head suddenly feels less like rock and more like ritual, as though the carved charms give it warmth. Not physical warmth, but a sense of companies, if the object itself promises, "Don't worry, I've got your back." Well, technically your head. Asterisk. What fascinates you is how tactile these designs must have felt. Stone-carved grooves under fingertips gave the sleeper confidence just by touch. No need for words or long prayers. One brush of your hand across the engraved lotus, and you felt reassured that your dreams and maybe your neck were protected. Isn't that what pillows still do for us in a way? We fluff them, punch them into shape, give them secret rituals of folding or tucking, all simple gestures of reassurance before surrendering to sleep. Asterisk. There's humor in this, too. The modern phrase, "sleep like a rock," feels almost prophetic here. Except you aren't asterisk on asterisk soft bedding. Quite literally, you asterisk are asterisk on a rock. Egyptians were far ahead of the linguistic curve. Asterisk. As the night grows deeper, you imagine Bes himself perched somewhere above, glaring with googly-eyed determination into the dark, daring nightmares to even try their luck. You think about the villagers outside this little home, each hugging sleep with their own mix of mats, linens, and charms. In the hush, it seems everyone believed in giving slumber its proper defenses. Asterisk. So, as your head eases back against the curved stone arch, the carved lines beneath you whisper something older than history itself. Sleep in peace, guarded by symbols, light enough to carry you over the edge of dreaming. You shift slightly, letting your fingers trace along the carved symbols, and soon your mind wanders toward the more colorful guardians of Egyptian bedtime. Of all the figures who might keep you company while you attempt to snooze on this sturdy crescent of stone, none is quite as eccentric or amusing as the god Bes. Asterisk. Picture him in your mind's eye for a moment. Short, bow-legged, with a beard as unkempt as a hurriedly trimmed shrub. He has a lion's mane, a tongue often sticking out in mischief, and large googly eyes that seem to say, "Yes, I see you and no, you're not getting away with anything tonight." Egyptians adored him because, unlike the typically regal gods who demanded temples and long hymns, Base was a house guardian, a cheerful, protective, slightly absurd fellow who preferred to hang out at the bedside, scaring away nightmares with funny faces, like a mythological babysitter. Asterisk. Here's the widely accepted fact. Base was associated with childbirth, home life, music, and protection in sleep. His images appeared not just on headrests, but also on amulets, cosmetics, handles, and even painted walls. Ordinary families found comfort in the idea that a divine figure would stand watch, not over grand kingdoms, but over the small, ordinary moments, births, naps, the baby who simply refuses to sleep. Asterisk now for the quirky detail. Unlike most Egyptian gods, who kept their composure, Base was intentionally portrayed as comical, even ugly, because his distorted appearance was thought to drive away evil. Night terrors could only be chased off by something that looked scarier than they did. Imagine a divine bodyguard making terrifying faces at villains, and you've got Bess' entire resume. And here's an open question. Was he truly just a household figure? Or did he once have a larger role in Egyptian state religion that got lost in the sands of time? Scholars debate whether he began as a minor trickster and later gained popularity among commoners, or if he always belonged exclusively to the cozy corners of bedchambers. Asterisk, you close your eyes, imagining the comforting absurdity. Your pillow, already rock hard, now doubles as a stage for a benevolent, outrageous little deity. He crouches protectively at your side, glaring at the dark until even the frogs think twice about croaking too loudly. Not exactly a lullaby, but effective all the same. Asterisk, the night air continues to move softly across your skin, tugging away the warmth that the clay walls still release from daytime. In next-door homes, other families may have quietly placed figurines of Base near reed mats, or whispered tiny charms as lamps flickered out. Children, uneasy after a scary story or strange shadow, might have felt safer knowing that the wild little god was making silly grimaces into the darkness. It becomes oddly endearing millennia later. Parents still chase away nightmares with goofy jokes, funny faces, and whispered "Don't worry, I'm right here." Base, in other words, was history's earliest dad joke champion. Asterisk, your neck might still argue with the pillow, but your imagination begins to calm under the thought. Someone or something was always there to keep the night watch. Guardians may not always look regal or polished. Sometimes they look like bow-legged dwarfs dancing noisily across the edges of dreams just to keep you safe. Asterisk, and with that image hovering beside you, the ancient noise of frogs, distant donkeys, and whispering reeds begins to merge into a softer hum. A bedtime symphony scored by gods both mighty and silly, just waiting to usher you into a sleep you can trust. Asterisk, asterisk, the night has deepened, and as you lie there, your neck, hoping this stone experiment counts as personal growth, you begin to wonder, did everyone in Egypt sleep like this? Surely pharaohs weren't subjected to the same stiff routine as farmers, right? Your curiosity takes you drifting toward the idea of contrast palaces versus poor beds, velvet dreams versus scratchy mats. Asterisk, inside the grand palaces of Thebes or Memphis, sleep must have asterisk looked asterisk quite different. Imagine guards pacing quietly through decorated corridors, the faint light of oil lamps flickering against polished limestone walls painted with stars. In royal chambers, woven linen sheets were softer, finely bleached until they shimmered like river foam. Pillows, yes, still often headrests, could be crafted of ivory with delicate carvings of protective deities. These weren't just sleep aids. They were luxury statements. Sleeping like royalty meant balancing comfort with symbolism, wrapped in better linen. head perched on ivory instead of plain wood, with charms designed to follow you into night. Asterisk, here's the widely accepted fact. Archaeological evidence confirms that richer classes owned headrests made from finer materials, ivory, even imported woods. We also know noble families had access to costlier linens and crafted furniture. The bed, for them, wasn't a mat on the floor, but oftentimes a raised wooden framing, innovation that people of lower means rarely afforded. Sleeping inches above the floor helped airflow even further and kept creepy crawlies from intruding. Asterisk. Meanwhile, back in the village house you occupied earlier, life was humbler. The farmer's children slept side by side, sometimes with livestock just meters away, on mats tightly woven from reeds. Pillow alternatives here were far simpler, rolled up fabric or even a bundle of spare clothing. Comfort was not measured in thread count, but in the ability to get through a night's rest without being bitten by insects or woken by the occasional honking goose. Asterisk. Quirky detail. In poorer homes, beds sometimes doubled as work surfaces in small spaces. A rolled-up mattress could turn the bedroom into a weaving corner. So the moment you stretched out was also the moment you reclaimed just a sliver of personal space. You couldn't exactly argue for king-sized indulgence in a one-room mudbrick home that had to juggle cooking, storage, and children all under the same roof. Asterisk, and here's the open question. Did ordinary Egyptians ever look at noble headrests and think, that must be far more comfortable? Or was the symbolic ritual of dreams universal, regardless of class? Scholars can't quite say whether stone or wooden headrests for elites were luxuriously plush in spirit, or whether they were, to everyday folk, simply extravagant versions of the same hard truth. Sleep everywhere was still a balancing act. Asterisk. As you picture this divide, you smile at the irony. You, here in our present age, curl into mattresses that cost more than a used car. You defend your preferred pillow brand as though it were a political party. Yet for Egyptians, an entire hierarchy from farmer to queen shared the experience of placing their heads on weighty, rigid pedestals. It's a strangely unifying detail. Despite all gulf of wealth or privilege, everyone had a sore neck. Asterisk. The sounds around you echo this contrast as well. The farmer's home you were in earlier is quiet, except for animal sighs and flood ditch frogs. In palaces, the night hums differently, the distant laughter of entertainers wrapping up, a flute trailing through marble corridors, the soft brush of sandals on polished floors as servants extinguish lamps. Two ways of life, but both eventually return to the same point: closing of eyes and surrender to sleep. Asterisk. And so, whether on a mat bound with reeds or an ivory pedestal dressed with charms, all Egyptians curled into dreams under the same familiar stars. The Nile whispered to both, the desert cooled the same breeze, and sleep carried everyone equally, commoner and king alike, on its steady tide. You've gotten somewhat used to the stiff balance act of the headrest, but now let's step outside the walls of the palace or house. Walk with me a little closer to the Nile. Out here, where the night air swells with a deep and steady rhythm, you begin to feel how sleep itself was tethered to the cycles of the river. Egyptians didn't have alarms, phone notifications, or espresso machines. They had frogs, water currents, and the calendar of floods. Asterisk. The flood season, known as the asterisk inundation. Asterisk wasn't some minor inconvenience. It was the heartbeat of the civilization. Each summer, the Nile swelled, rose over its banks, spilled into the fields, and retreated again, leaving behind rich, black silt. This cycle dictated everything: farming, trade, rituals, even when people slept easiest. During the flood, nights were heavier with moisture, air thicker. Beds shifted occasionally onto rooftops, for breezes strong enough to ease the damp. And outside, you could fall asleep to the singing chorus of frogs, whose voices reached almost symphonic levels during the wet season. Imagine a natural sound machine installed by the river gods themselves. Asterisk. Here's your widely accepted fact. Egyptians organized their agricultural calendar around this rhythm. Work, meals, even religious festivals flowed from the Nile's timer, binding human life to waters patient, rising and falling. For sleep, this meant bodies tuned themselves to river song. Early to bed, early to rise wasn't a slogan. Here it was survival. Farmers rose with the dawn to meet their fields. They sank bone-tired into mats soon after nightfall. Circadian rhythm was a lifestyle, not a wellness hack. Asterisk now for a quirky detail. Some texts describe how Egyptians believed the floodwaters carried not just nutrients, but the voices of gods. Imagine lying there at night with your head propped on a stone pillow, half believing that the river sounds themselves, or whispers a divine lullaby floating into your dreams. Perhaps that's why families chose to sleep outdoors on rooftops in flood season, letting both the cool air and the murmur of the Nile cradle them. Asterisk. And then comes the open question. Was this connection to the Nile conscious ritual, or just habit born from necessity? Did Egyptians treat the natural sounds outside like deliberate bedtime music, or was it simply so woven into their lives that they stopped noticing it altogether? Maybe it's both part mystical awareness, part ordinary familiarity. Historians can only speculate, but as you stand here now, breathing it all in, it does feel enchanting. The frogs are relentless tonight. If you close your eyes, you could almost mistake them for the hum of a distant generator in a modern city. At the same time, the water's lap against the embankment is slow, steady, hypnotic like the earth itself, falling into deep exhalations. To your right, you glimpse lantern lights in another house dimming, the murmur of a tired family resolving itself into silence. To your left, the fields glisten faintly under moonlight, submerged for now, resting as fully as the farmers who will till them again. Asterisk. There's something grounding in this stillness. Each creature, plant, and human bends to this same rhythm. The people's sleep isn't personal here, it's communal. Everyone is rocked by the water, cooled by the breeze, and lulled by a chorus of amphibians so loud they could headline a natural concert. You shift again on your stone headrest, and though your neck protests, your chest breathes more deeply, syncing with the steady flood rhythm. Asterisk. It is strangely reassuring. You are small, but connected. Your body is another reed bent by the river winds, another sleeper beneath the endless ancient stars, and in that connection, the hum of insects, the croak of frogs, the breathable sky above you find a new rhythm of your own, one slow enough to drift, at last toward rest. Asterisk. Your body has blended with the river's rhythm now, but let's wander back indoors, where another layer of the Egyptian bedtime routine awaits. Remedies, oils, and potions meant to soothe tired limbs and uneasy dreams. The headrest may steady your skull, but the Egyptians were never shy about calling in extra help from their overflowing apothecary cupboards, gardens, and a good dose of magical thinking. Asterisk. As you shift gently on your reed mat, imagine a small ceramic jar placed nearby, sealed with a little plug of beeswax. Pop it open, and the faint perfume of myrrh sighs upward, cedar-like and deep, the scent clinging to the air like low music. Oils like these were rubbed onto arms, feet, and sometimes even smoothed along pillow headrests, in hopes of nudging the sleeper toward relaxation. Think of it as the world's earliest lavender diffuser, except these people also happen to believe the oils doubled as spiritual armor. Asterisk. Here's the widely accepted fact. Egyptians used fragrant concoctions for both practical and sacred purposes. Frankincense, myrrh, and cedar oils soothed muscles, kept insects at bay, and symbolized purification. Some households would even burn incense before bed, allowing its smoke to curl into corners as if sweeping away lurking spirits. They hadn't invented scented candles, but they were nailing the vibe centuries ahead of us. Asterisk. And now, for the quirky detail. Among the recommended nighttime remedies was garlic. Yes, garlic, which they believed could ward off illness and evil. Imagine the bedtime routine. Dab a little oil for fragrance. Chew some garlic for health. Then roll onto your mat smelling like you were preparing for both romance and a vampire hunt. Somewhere in ancient Egypt, someone surely muttered, "Is intimacy possible when bedtime breath could drive out even the gods?" Asterisk. And of course, here's an open question. Were these remedies genuinely effective for sleep? Or were they more about peace of mind? Modern science can confirm some oils repel insects, but whether perfumed ointments incubated better dreams is impossible to know. Perhaps the real truth lies outside science entirely. It didn't matter if it worked. It mattered if you felt safer, calmer, readier to drift. Asterisk. Back in this small mud-brick house, you can almost hear the household readying at bedtime. Someone massages oil into sore calves after long hours working the field. Another ties a protective amulet near the door, while a faint plume of incense curls lazily upward until it vanishes against night. Everything smells of smoke, garlic, and subtle flowers from the tiny garden outside. You, tilted precariously on your stone support, are suddenly in the middle of what feels like a cozy, ancient spa, albeit one where cucumbers on the eyes are replaced by onions in the cooking pot. Asterisk. The funny part. These remedies, as unusual as they may sound, belong to the same instinct we carry today. We sip herbal teas, put drops of lavender on pillows, run white noise apps, and pretend none of this is ritual, when in truth, it's exactly the same. Like them, we're scared of sleeplessness, unsettled by the unknown of dreams, but willing to summon almost any tool to trick our bodies back into rhythm. Humans, millennia apart, fiddling with bedtime gadgets like anxious children pretending they can personally boss around the night. Asterisk. You tilt your headstone unyielding as ever, but the cool surface carries that faint aroma of oil rubbed earlier, a subtle balm on the nose and in memory. Outside, frogs remain your ever-faithful chorus. Inside, garlic lingers comically, but reassuringly in the air. Between remedies against spirits, oils against insects, and charms against bad dreams, the Egyptians remind you, sleep may not always mean comfort, but it can always mean safety. Asterisk. So, wrapped in linen and mystery, perfumed faintly with resin and humored by garlic's stubborn sharpness, you'll let yourself sink just a little further. Maybe these potions truly worked. Maybe they didn't. But the truth that matters most hasn't changed, whatever it takes. The night should feel like something you can trust. Your lids grow heavier in this perfumed twilight, but as you stir and let your focus shift, you suddenly notice something unusual carved into the asterisk, other asterisk headrest propped in the corner. It's not just for the living. This one looks oddly ceremonial, pristine, and sturdier than the rest. When you draw nearer, the realization ripples through you. Even the asterisk dead asterisk in ancient Egypt were given pillows. Asterisk. Yes, as strange as it sounds, the Egyptians decided that mummies needed headrests too. To them, sleep and death weren't distant cousins, they were nearly the same family. Just as you rest tonight, the dead were thought to rest eternally, head lifted gently on a carved block, guided into the afterlife with the same tools that carried them through ordinary nights. You shift on your mat, half amused, half awed. Apparently, you murmur to yourself, nobody gets out of using these things. Asterisk. Here's the widely accepted fact. Archaeologists have found headrests in burial chambers dating back to the Old Kingdom, crafted from alabaster, wood, ivory, or stone. They were placed under the heads of mummies, or carved directly into coffins, to hold the head aloft. The underlying belief was that it wasn't merely physical, it was symbolic. By supporting the head, the seat of vision and speech, the headrest helped guard the soul, and ensure the deceased could wake in the afterlife refreshed. Asterisk. Now, for a curious, quirky detail, some funerary headrests bore inscriptions of protective spells. Imagine that 10 eternal bedtime message carved for you to sleep tight through the centuries. One surviving example even carries a plea to the sun god to protect the sleeper as dawn rises forever. It's the timeless equivalent of someone carving *sweet dreams* into your pillow, except in hieroglyphs and intended to last all eternity. And here's the open question. Were these headrests really used by the deceased as part of rituals, or were they strictly symbolic gestures that served no practical role once the body was wrapped in its linen swaddling? Did embalmers actually set the mummy's head on them, or did they simply tuck the object close by because, well, you never want to enter the next world underprepared? Scholars debate, but let's face it, we'll never be able to ask the original owners. Step with me into a tomb chamber for a moment. Dust clings to the air, glimmering like starlight caught underground. Painted walls tell you of wheat harvests, barge journeys, and prayers whispered to gods you can't quite pronounce. And there, among the supplies for eternity, jars of food, golden trinkets, tiny carved figurines rests, a little headrest. Perhaps it's not ornate, perhaps it's plain, but its message is clear. Even beyond this life, your head will never rest on bare ground. It's funny, in a tender way. Tonight, you prop your complaining neck on a hard curve, sighing at the lack of squish. But for an Egyptian soul, this same curve was an anchor against chaos. A reassurance that when they slept the great sleep, divine guardians would keep them safe. The pillow that makes you grimace was, for them, one of the most comforting promises they could imagine. So when your eyes start to droop now, remember you're not alone. Dreamers both alive and long gone lie with you, heads lifted on stone, waiting for whatever visions come. Comfort isn't always cotton, sometimes it's solid, weighty, permanenta, promise carved for both night and eternity. You roll your head ever so slightly, don't worry. The stone isn't going anywhere. And realize that not all of these curious contraptions were identical. Some looked almost delicate, slim, and polished like crescent moons. Others were bulky, thick, almost daring your skull to wrestle them into place. And beyond stone, you start noticing shapes in wood, ivory, and even ceramic. Clearly, no two headrests were equal. Here's the widely accepted fact. Egyptians crafted headrests from a variety of materials depending on wealth, status, and availability. The humbler versions were carved from local wood or stone. Alabaster, with its smooth translucence, made for elegant and fragile pieces among the elite. And ivory brought from afar through African trade routes was the crang de la crang of bedtime luxury. If you slept on ivory, you weren't just resting. You were basically starring in Egypt's version of a linen commercial. Now, for the quirky detail that makes you grin, archaeologists have actually found ivory headrests with inlays of gold. Yes, gold. Which means while the rest of us toss and turn, trying to get comfortable on a memory foam, someone in Egypt's high society was literally propping their sweaty head on gold-trimmed ivory furniture. It's the ancient equivalent of saying, I like to rough it, but make it bougie. One almost wonders if they had servants just to polish the headdress before bedtime. And here's the open debate. Were these fine materials chosen solely for durability and show? Or did different types signify unique spiritual significance? Did stone, heavier and cooler, symbolize permanence and protection, while ivory aligned with purity or divine favor? No one can answer definitively, but it does get you thinking. Was the night's sleep tied more tightly to function, fashion, or faith? You run your hands across the surfaces. The stone versions feel coarse and enduring, like a relic that could last forever. The wood models are lighter, slightly more forgiving, but prone to scratches, dents, even the ivory one, all pale smoothness, feels almost alive under your fingertips, polished by long use. Each whispers a different texture, a different story of the head it once supported. Asterisk behind you. The quiet house breathes steadily in sync with the Nile's rhythm. The family snores on their mats, animals twitch beside them. Yet, inside this little museum of your imagination, the variety of headrests paints a silent portrait of Egyptian society. Status wasn't shouted with flashy sneakers or gadgets. It was whispered in the curve of your nighttime support. Stone or ivory, humble or gold-trimmed, each version said something about who you were and what you valued. Asterisk, it's easy to laugh at this now. You imagine an ancient teenager rolling their eyes at their parents. Ugh, this model is last year's style. All of my friends have the alabaster design with lotus cravings. Maybe there was even a booming pillow. Fashion market by the Nile craftsmen competing, touting their materials like mattress companies today. Are you a side sleeper or a back sleeper? Have I got a headrest for you? Asterisk still. There's beauty in the idea that no matter what material they chose, the purpose remained constant. Support, consistency, and faith. To rest your head every night in the same position isn't only to find comfort. It's to remind your soul of its place in a greater cycle, rising, resting, rising again. Stone, wood, ivory. Just variations on the same eternal lullaby. Asterisk, you stretch, your neck easing into the steady curve again. It doesn't matter now whether the pillow beneath you is rough stone or gleaming ivory. It holds you, and that is enough. The room, quiet as river mud after the flood has passed, feels like it's holding a secret. You glance across to a figure in the shadows, an artisan, hunched over a fresh block of limestone, carefully chiseling as if the world might end if he slips. His tools are simple. A wooden mallet, copper chisels dulled by long use, and an abundance of patience. For you and me, fashioning a place to prop your head at night would mean fluffing up a pillow. For him, it means hours of carving, smoothing, and polishing stone until it becomes almost intimate, an object meant to cradle someone's dreams. Asterisk. Here's the widely accepted fact. Artisans of the Middle and New Kingdoms were highly skilled and often worked in specialized guilds or workshops attached to temples and royal projects. Even everyday items, like furniture or cosmetic jars, could be imbued with incredible precision. A pillow wasn't just made in haste. It reflected the respect they had for crafting beauty into even the smallest corners of life. Asterisk now. For the quirky detail, it's thought that some craftsmen treated headrests almost like jewelry. They polished them so finely that they gleamed tiny arcs of moonlight captured for sleepers to rest on. Picture sitting down after a long day, laying your head not just on a dull block but on a gleaming, smoothed crescent. It was luxury hidden in what seemed utilitarian. Even the afterlife headrests sometimes bore such artistry that archaeologists mistake them at first for ceremonial offerings. Asterisk. Your open question here, was every headrest built specifically for one client, personalized like a modern custom mattress, or were some produced en masse in a kind of Bed Bath & Beyond of Thebes? We don't know. And frankly, the absence of a return policy for stone pillows leaves room for speculation. Imagine lugging one home, realizing it cricked your neck, and sighing, well, I guess I'll be uncomfortable for the next 30 years. Asterisk still. Watching the artisan at his work now, there's a hypnotic rhythm to it. Each tap of his mallet echoes softly, gentle enough to blend with the night's lull. Then comes the sound of sand rubbed over the surface, smoothing the arch into something glossy and uninterrupted. A repeated motion, over and over, the kind of patient work that settles you deeper into drowsiness just listening to it. He doesn't rush, because he knows someone's head, someone's dreams, will rely on this piece for decades, maybe centuries. Asterisk. In your imagination, you crouch beside him. Dust falls across his lap like pale sugar, while sweat glistens on his brow despite the cool night air. He pauses only to gulp water from a small jug, wipes his hands, and resumes. Each fragment chipped away feels less like stone and more like time itself, shaped one grain at a time. There's humility here, and devotion too. Asterisk, and soon. You notice how careful he is, not just about the shape, but about what symbols to add. That protective lotus isn't an extra flourish. It's essential. A family will whisper their child's name while tracing it before bed. A weary farmer will press his temple against Beth's bulging eyes. Dream protection, neck support, spiritual insurance, all carried in one object. Asterisk, it dawns on you. Maybe crafting pillows really was akin to jewelry making. Both touched fragile parts of human life. One adorned the visible body during celebrations. The other protected the invisible spirit during sleep. Both mattered, both carried weight. Asterisk, you lean back onto your own headrest again. Still stiff, still stubborn, but no longer just a random block. You imagine the artisan who shaped yours, day after day, carving against the stone like a heartbeat. And suddenly, your head feels not just supported by rock but by care so strong it reaches, across 3,000 years, to hold you gently as you drift. Asterisk, asterisk. Your breathing softens as you imagine the artisan's rhythm fading into silence. But even centuries later, people historians, archaeologists, wide-eyed museum visitors are still scratching their heads, pardon the pun, about these curious bedtime pedestals. Were they truly functional? Or were they closer to ritual objects, never intended for nightly tossing until you realize, with your own neck growing a little stiff, that the question is far from settled. Asterisk, here's the widely accepted fact. There's clear evidence that headrests were used both in life asterisk and asterisk in death. They've been discovered in household ruins, worn smooth from repeated use, as well as in tombs, where untouched versions waited loyally by mummified heads. This dual presence convinces scholars the designs weren't limited only to ceremonial use. People slept with them, sweated against them, breathed on them all, while they also carried profound symbolic meaning. Asterisk now, here's the quirky detail. Some of the more elaborate headrests were excavated with magical spells, inscribed directly onto them. One text declares the object a weapon against the evil dead who might attack during slumber. A pillow as both ergonomic device and dream exorcism tool. Sleep comfortably, and if something spooky shows up, throw the headrest at it. You can't help smiling at the absurd practicality. It's asterisk both asterisk charm and cudgel, asterisk and the open question, comfort itself. Were they truly restful? Or was the practice more about symbolism than support? Some argue that ordinary Egyptians probably balled up cloth, reserving stone headrests for burials. Others insist the worn-down surfaces prove hours of skulls perched nightly, adjusting until bodies got used to the feel. It's the unsolved puzzle that makes you adjust your own neck again. Functional bed prop or glorified amulet? History hums with hesitation, offering no decisive answer. Asterisk, the debate itself is oddly soothing, as frogs trill outside and a donkey somewhere brays into dreams. You picture scholars through the centuries, leaning on their desks, muttering variations of, but asterisk, why asterisk would anyone actually use this? Maybe the Egyptians would chuckle at our confusion, shrugging, because it worked for us. Have you ever tried explaining to a time traveler why you curl on a foam rectangle with springs, wrapped in fabric and clutching decorative pillows that serve no practical function? Comfort, after all, is relative. Asterisk, the longer you lie here, the more you wonder if that's the point. Maybe historians will forever argue because the answer isn't in facts, but in feelings. For Egyptians, a secure, raised headrest carried symbolism and reassurance. And reassurance, even if not soft, is its own kind of comfort. Asterisk, your eyes wander back to the carved lotus visible in the lantern glow. Smooth grooves catch faint shadows, reminding you how long hands have debated its meaning, polished its surface, prayed over its curves. Sleep may not reveal answers, but it certainly carries mysteries. Tonight, you share in one, lying on stone, neck oddly aligned, but heart carried into questions with no neat solutions. Asterisk, and you find that strangely settling, like drifting to sleep on a question mark. Your head is still balanced perhaps, defiantly on this curved slab of ingenuity. But now your thoughts wander outward, far beyond Egypt's borders. After all, if Egyptians put so much faith and neck strain into these stone structures, surely other cultures had their own strange ways of keeping the head supported. Spoiler, they did. And you might be relieved that Egypt wasn't the only civilization to surrender the dream of plump pillows. Asterisk, here's the widely accepted fact. Wooden and ceramic headrests were also popular in East Asia, particularly in ancient China. Some of these were ornately decorated with painted scenes or symbolic animals, the kind of pillow that looked like artwork, but felt about as cozy as resting your temple against a porcelain vase. In truth, the Chinese sometimes preferred hard pillows because they believed overly soft cushions robbed you of energy, leaving you sluggish. A stiff head kept the spirit alert and the body healthier. Comfort, optional. Chi alignment, essential. Asterisk now, for the quirky detail. In Japan, during parts of the Heian period, noble women propped their elegant coiffures on small wooden supports so their elaborate hairstyles wouldn't collapse overnight. Imagine choosing between neck pain and the horror of waking with bedhead that had taken your servants 2 hours to weave. Suddenly your rock pillow feels less absurd. It didn't double as hairspray preservation. Asterisk. And here's the open question. Were these similarities across cultures born of coincidence? Or were they indirectly influenced by cross-cultural trade? We know the Silk Road would eventually unite China with Western Asia. But does the stiff, head-raised sleeping style predate those exchanges, or did people everywhere simply realize, well, the ground is hard, maybe my pillow should be too? Historians throw their arms in collective helplessness, leaving it one of those puzzling convergences of human practicality. Asterisk, back at the Nile, though it's charming to think of this pillow as part of a global club of questionable comfort. Africans farther south, Chinese dynasties in the east, medieval aristocrats elsewhere all found value in headrests. Different designs, same principle. Raise the skull, cool the sleeper, guard the spirit. Belief in the magic of sleep transcended geography. Across cultures, people agreed that rest was far too precious to leave unassisted. Asterisk, you shift your tired head once again, amused by the absurdity of it all. The thought comes that our modern pillow kingdoms down feathers, memory foam, buckwheat hulls aren't the pinnacle of comfort so much as another chapter in the experimentation saga. Somewhere hundreds of years from now, another archaeologist might chuckle at our obsession with cooling gel inserts and wonder, asterisk, how on earth did they rest with that glowing rectangle called a smartphone beside their faces? Asterisk, asterisk, it makes you feel a little kinship, doesn't it? Whether it's a farmer on a reed mat, a Chinese scholar on porcelain, or a Japanese lady worrying about her hairpins, everyone lay down with the same small hope that tomorrow would start fresh, and tonight's dreams would be kind. Asterisk, the frogs keep croaking outside. The Nile keeps breathing steadily, across the desert, across continents, even across time. The ritual remains the same, the long sigh, the body pressed into rest, and the careful placement of a head on something not quite soft but still, somehow, reassuring. Asterisk, asterisk, the stone pillow hasn't gotten any softer, but now you start to smile at a reluctant companion through the long desert night. You've seen its place in the farmhouse, the palace, the artisan's workshop, even the tomb. You've smelled the oils rubbed before bed, heard the frogs composing their amphibian lullabies, and imagined the little god bass puffing out his cheeks to scare away your nightmares. And finally, you've discovered that across the world, people went to bed with equally strange ideas of comfort. Asterisk. Now the night begins to fade. Pink strokes of dawn gather over the desert horizon, spilling color onto the slow water of the Nile. You blink, neck stiff from your rocky perch, but the sunrise feels like reward. The farmers are already stirring, tying linen around their waists, and stepping toward the fields. The palaces yawn awake later, servants moving quietly to prepare long robes and brushes for wigs. But for one last moment, you stay still, breathing into the memory of the stone beneath your head. Asterisk. Here's the widely accepted fact we rest on. To the Egyptians, sleep was as ritual-filled as waking life. Headrests weren't trivial but symbolically charged, guardians of dreams, tools of comfort, bridges between living and afterlife. Each piece carried meaning as steady as the Nile itself. Sleep was never just a pause. It was protection, renewal, and a glimpse into eternity. Asterisk. Here's the charming, quirky detail I leave you with. A few headrests were even given tiny leather pads to soften the hard curve. Yes, even in antiquity, some clever soul realized stone against skull might be one step too far, and improvised just enough padding to make it humane. It's nice to think that practicality and compassion weren't mutually exclusive. Asterisk. And the open question is one you'll carry with you tonight. If Egyptians believed sleep was sacred enough for divine guardians and stone-carved charms, how do we treat our hours of rest? Do we honor it the same way? Or do we take it for granted, pushing it aside for glowing screens, caffeine, and alarm clocks that jar us out of peace? No scholar can answer that part. Only you, lying peacefully now beneath your own roof, can. Asterisk. So picture this. You rise slowly from your borrowed mat, dust clinging to your feet as you step out into dawn. You leave the little mudbrick house behind the reeds, the laughing god base, the gleaming headrest perched in the corner, like a holy relic of everyday life. The Nile says goodbye with its steady sigh. The desert air returns you to your own century. Asterisk. And when, at last, you return to your bed tonight, the familiar softness under your neck, your pillow as squishy as the Egyptians would have found comically, you'll carry with you this story of stone, of gods, of frogs, of sleep deep enough to endure for 3,000 years. Asterisk. Because in the end, sleep has always been about the same thing: comfort, safety, surrender, whether carved in alabaster, balanced on ivory, or fluffed into cotton. Asterisk. Breathe slowly now, sinking into your own pillow with gratitude. Your head is cushioned, your body at ease. The Egyptians might laugh at your feather-filled softness, but they would understand why you crave rest. For rest is eternal, as necessary now as it was by the Nile. Asterisk. And now, gently set aside the last images of limestone chambers and Nile breezes. Let your breathing fall into rhythm. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Each inhale soft and slow, each exhale just a little longer, letting go of everything heavy. Asterisk. Imagine yourself lying beneath stars, more ancient than memory, yet entirely familiar. Their light drifts down over you like a fine linen sheet, cooling, wrapping, holding. Around you is silence, punctuated only by the steady pulse of your own breath. The ground is gone. The house is gone, and beneath your head is no longer stone, wood, or ivory, but the perfect softness of this moment. You are held safely, exactly as you need to be. Asterisk. Your body is heavy now, sinking deeper into the mattress, yet strangely lighter to support it without effort, guided gently toward calm. Every muscle loosens as though centuries of labor have lifted away. Every thought softens into mist. Asterisk. The stone pillows of ancient days fade, leaving behind only their quiet message. Rest is sacred. Rest is protection. Rest is renewal. Asterisk. And so you drift, carried not by the Nile tonight, but by breath and comfort, into dreams that whisper without fear, watched over not by base nor carved charms, but by your own safe space, your own chosen guardians of peace. Asterisk, let yourself slip fully now. Somewhere deep, somewhere kind. The story rests. You rest. The night keeps watch. Steady, endless,